Hi, Susie. Thanks for taking the time to answer a few questions. How are things going up there at the minute with the lockdown? Is it affecting your tea production at all?
Hi, John. No, we're all good at the moment. I mean, the jobs that need doing are not really affected by lockdown at the moment. We're plucking, making tea. The help that we have is still happy to turn up to work. So we've got nothing to complain about.
Yeah, down here in Edinburgh, it's a bit different, but yeah.
Don't envy you guys.
So I have a few questions. A couple of them came from some of our followers on Instagram. I think it covers just the basics of how you got into tea, how you grow tea, and just for some of our customers to find out a little bit more about what is Kinnettles Gold and how it's made. Question number one, which was from Instagram, is what was your inspiration to start growing tea in Scotland in the first place?
Right. It was a long time ago, back in 2007. We actually have a farm up here. It's an arable farm, and we were looking to diversify, find a slightly higher end crop. And because there's quite a lot of areas around the farm that's difficult to get any large machinery into, it seemed worth looking into. And fortunately, I saw an article in a dentist's waiting room about growing tea down in Cornwall. And I thought, well, let's try it. So that's the background. That is how I got into it all those many years ago.
When I talk to customers about growing tea in Scotland, one of the first things that they always say to me is it not too cold to grow tea in Scotland? What's it like trying to get tea to grow up here? Is the climate suited to growing tea?
Okay, the simple answer is they're absolutely right. Yes, it is too cold. However, you have to bear in mind that tea doesn't like high winds. It doesn't like slushy, wet snow either. So if you can mitigate that to as greater extent as you can, then you have a project. And thankfully, tea does go dormant over the winter. So when the weather's at its very worst, the bushes have completely seized up. So that first flush when it happens is absolutely delicious because they're basically stressed. And so the answer to your question is small yields, tiny yields in Scotland, but very lovely high-end, beautiful tea. So we have to look after it. We have to nurture them basically for growing in Scotland.
So you said you first planted your tea bushes in 2007. How long does it actually take then between planting the tea and when you actually get to pick something and produce something from the plant?
Oh golly, do you know what? It's like growing an orchard. You do have to wait a long time before you get that reward. So you're looking at 4 to 5 years before you can actually start plucking. The thing is, when we started in 2007, we planted outside and the weather was just too rough and too tough. These were cuttings and it was a real struggle. So we then started again using polytunnels, and that provided that protection. It allowed season extension, and it allowed us to look after our bushes more easily, to give them liquid manures from all the nettles, the comfrey, and stockens here we have in Scotland, and so we've been able to care for that for our Kinnettles Gold and give it the best conditions we possibly can. So our Kinnettles Gold ones that we have now, they're 10 years old and they're doing well.
So we first bought Kinnettles Gold in 2015, so it really did take that long between planting your plants and the tea being ready to make something as good as Kinnettles then.
Yeah, and also we needed, because I made a lot of mistakes in 2014 and I had lots of ideas I wanted to try, which had been picked up when I was out in Darjeeling, and I wasn't hitting the mark. And so it wasn't, we also lost a year basically until I got consultancy help to really sort of fine tune things and have a tea that I was happy that you would like.
When I first tasted Kinnettles Gold in 2015, I was very impressed by the quality and its unique flavour. It was important to me as well when I was buying it. I just didn't just buy a novelty product. For me, it really needs to stand up to the quality of the handmade teas from more traditional tea growing regions, which I really do think it does. So tell us a little bit more about what goes into making Kinnettles Gold and how you make such a fantastic tea.
Right. Well, it starts with the plucking. So a bud and 2 leaves. We don't do a coarse pluck, and we make sure that that leaf is not hanging around before we get it onto the withering rack, so it doesn't get knocked about in any way. A bit like overseas, where things can sit in the basket for a little bit too long. And the other thing is also because we pluck well, there's not any sort of stick or leaf vein or anything like that. So we don't have wastage. Our ratio actually is about 4.3 kilograms of leaf would have to be plucked to get your 1 kilogram. So it's basically a 4.3 ratio.
You do have to pick quite a lot then to get the finished product. So how long does it take then for a batch of tea from picking to the finished leaf?
Well, this is always a really difficult question to answer, but if I say roughly 24 hours, because it depends. If you pluck on a day where it's really windy or really dry, then the leaf isn't going to need as much time withering. And it's all about how you get the moisture out of the leaf. So it can be anything between 16 to 20 hours withering. And then, of course, you've then got the rolling. And again, that depends on the condition of the leaf when it's come off its wither. And then you have your oxidation stage. And so again, that can be, 2.5 hours, might even be 3 hours. It depends again on the temperatures and the climate. And then finally you get the tea to the ovens. So I'd like to say 24 hours. That keeps it a simple answer, but it can vary.
So we buy from you about 2 kilos a year, roughly. How long does it then take to make just 2 kilos of tea? So you say it takes about it's a 4.3 kilo to 4.3 to 1 ratio of wet leaf to dry leaf. So to make 2 kilos, then how much can you pick then in one session? And then how long does it actually take to make that 2 kilos of tea?
Oh my God, it is so painfully slow. I mean, it is a labor of love, Jon. If I say basically, we do over 30 batches. So we're only picking about 250 grams of tea each time we do a pluck. So you're going to get 50 to 60 grams of made black tea at the end of the day. So the reason it is tiny quantities is we do what's called generational plucking, where it's a slightly as and when the leaf is looking absolutely beautiful, you get out there and you do a pluck. Now obviously bigger tea gardens don't have that luxury, but actually for Kinnettles Gold, it's little and often, and it's really, really tiny amounts each time we do it. But I probably do about 36, 37 batches a year, but we will take out, before giving it to you, we will take out any batches that don't quite hit the mark, where something may have just gone slightly wrong in the processing, or they're a little flat, or something's just not worked.
So calling it Kinnettles Gold is really, I suppose that's a really good description of it, because it is like gold, I suppose. It's expensive stuff.
Yeah, well, someone said it's apparently 1/10 the price of gold, which is a bit like, wow. It wasn't me who did that maths, Jon.
So Kinnettles Gold is a black tea, although when I brew it, it's like a very dark, it's not fully black, but when you decided to make the tea as a black tea and do that, what made you decide that? Was there a reason why you decided you wanted to do black tea rather than, say, green, white tea, oolong tea?
I absolutely love black tea. So that's my simple reason. Black tea has always been my love, and that's what I'm focused on.
So I think one question that I get asked a lot as well is, how do you learn how to make tea? And I suppose when I say they grow tea in Scotland, our customers, they say, so how do you learn how to make tea? How do you grow tea? So I suppose that is a really good question. How did you learn how to make tea?
I tried myself with lots of little different ideas as a result of going out to Makabari in 2013. And so I faffed around. I did everything from trying the sort of the meat mincer to goodness knows what. I mean, ridiculous. But the bottom line is you do need to get consultancy to fine tune things and take some of the stress out of it. Scotland's very different, so we're not going to be producing a Darjeeling. in Scotland, because the climate's different, the circumstances are different, the conditions you're making it in are totally different to Darjeeling. So once you've accepted that and you stop trying to reproduce a tea that you particularly like, then you're away. You can start actually getting it the way you want it and that you like it.
So did you have to develop then special processing techniques for yourself, just for Kinnettles Gold?
Yes, yeah. Basically, in a nutshell, but I probably have to chop off your arm before I told you. Otherwise, everybody would be doing it, and I'm very pleased with what I do and the way I do it. So, but without being difficult, it's not so different from the basic rules are the same: how you wither, how you roll, how you oxidize, how you dry it off in the ovens. These sort of things are givens, and then you tweak and make your adjustments to make it special.
I suppose when you read a lot of literature about tea growing and tea processing around the world, you have all the basic steps in the flow charts that are in all the publications.
Exactly.
But if you actually go out and visit the tea estates and speak to the owners and the growers and the people who are doing the processing, every single one is slightly different, and everyone has developed their own way of doing things. And I suppose that's what makes it so special. And I suppose that's what makes it absolutely fantastic. So that gives you the variation as well. So no, I think it's really great that you've taken the time to develop something which is completely unique to you. Yes, let's hope that it is kept secret for the future. So during your processing, learning how to do the processing and learning how to develop your own unique way of doing things, did you come across any pitfalls when you were starting to do that? Anything? And did any disasters happen?
Well, yeah, I think the biggest problem is which I've had a few shambles with, is protecting the first flush, because that is going to be the most delicious and interesting tea, and because we do such tiny amounts, we put all the batches together, so you're getting in your Kinnettles Gold a mixture of your first flush and your second flush, but the first flush is what really gives that complexity of flavor, and therefore it really matters. And if you get a frost and you're not quick enough on protecting that first flush, then it's a real nightmare, because you can still pluck it, and there is still this tea called frost tea, but it becomes family consumption. It's not actually going to be given to you at PekoeTea. And so it's not totally wasted, but you know what, you really don't need it. And it's happened a couple of times, and I'm absolutely furious at myself because it's quite avoidable, but because the tea is in polytunnels, so it's just a question of getting some fleece up and you're away. But it happens, John.
And how do you deal with things like pests and that kind of stuff? I know you make your teas organically as well, but
okay, there's two things to this. We have, like anybody in any part of the world, a tiny little insect called thrips. And so we have to try and reduce the amount of damage that they'll do. And I'm not saying thrips is a bad thing at all, because you have Oriental Beauty and it's absolutely delicious and gorgeous. And indeed, we do make a tea from anything damaged by thrips, and that's lovely. However, you would rather it didn't get into your entire crop. So we have to put up a sort of blue sticky paper, which has a scent on it that is attractive to thrips. And that way we manage to sort of keep a bit of a handle on it. But otherwise you have to do a closer pluck. So it's irritating, but it is manageable. And there's certain measures you can put in place to reduce it. But yeah, that's the problem. If you're organic, it will happen, and you just have to live with it.
So next question is another one from Instagram. This one is, how does the Scottish terroir compare to other tea growing regions around the world? And has it affected the finished tea product? Do you think it has had a major effect on the finished flavour of the Kinnettles?
Okay, now that is where to begin with that question. So, yes, I do, is the simple answer. Of course, it makes a difference. You can tell the Kenyan teas jump out a mile. You know, you can tell your Darjeelings, you know. And what we would love is that in the course of time, people would recognise Scottish teas as also having that a uniqueness where you can taste it and say, gosh, this is Scottish tea. But when you think about the fact that from one tea bush, I could make a green tea, a yellow tea, a pu'er tea, I could make any type of tea, it is quite evident that processing is a very large part of it as well. So yeah, the simple answer is yes, we've got lovely acidic, sandy, loamy soils. It's perfect for tea. It's good for that access to micronutrients. It's a win-win on many, many levels, but the processing is important too.
Because I know that Kinnettles has a very unique flavour, which is appley and spicy flavour, which I think is absolutely fantastic. And if you were to put it against other teas in a blind tasting, you can pick it out a mile off. So I personally think that the Scottish terroir does have an effect. It'll be interesting to see how some of the other teas that are grown in Scotland come out as more come online in the future.
We have done some tests with some of the other gardens as part of the Tea Gardens of Scotland group, and there are small differences, but again, that's the aspect of people's walled gardens. It's the amount of daylight they get on them. It's, you know, situation. It is important, but the processing is probably the largest contributor.
So how do you feel Scottish tea then stands up against handmade teas from more established places around the world? Scotland, as we were saying before, is not, it's not the first place you'd think of when it comes to growing tea. And when you look at the what goes into making Kinnettles, for example, and how much labour goes into it and how much small amount you actually produce for the amount of effort, it's going to need to stand up. What do you think about Kinnettles against the likes of, say, Japanese sencha or Wu Yi oolongs or handmade Darjeelings and that kind of thing?
Golly, well, it's very difficult to compare a tea to other teas. I'm slightly sort of thrown by that question because Kinnettles Gold, Kinnettles Gold as such, I think it's unique. We've been to Shizuoka province. We went out in 2017 to Japan, and tea master there tasted it and was blown away with it. But, you know, you're not comparing like with like. So there are beautiful Japanese black teas out there, but they taste very different to Kinnettles Gold, but they still appreciated Kinnettles Gold. So it's so much in the eye of the beholder, John. It really is. And there aren't enough Scottish teas yet. I mean, Kinnettles Gold has been a standalone 100% pure Scottish black tea. There has been nothing else out there yet that is pure. People might add things to it and they might make a blend with the Scottish tea, you know, as part of that percentage. But to my knowledge, Kinnettles Gold is the only one out there. And as our Tea Gardens of Scotland group brings theirs on at the end of this year, then there'll be some more.
It's quite a tricky question, but I mean, I personally feel that Kinnettles Gold stands up to scrutiny against teas which are grown elsewhere, and I have actually sent samples of it around the world to different tea masters and tea growers, and they've all been very impressed by what's coming out of Scotland. They don't believe me that it's been grown in Scotland because of the quality of it, and so I think that's something to be very encouraged by. So, final question. You mentioned briefly the Tea Gardens of Scotland. What do you think the future of tea growing in Scotland is going to be? And overall, how do you see the market for Scottish grown tea developing over, say, the next 5-10 years?
I think the market is going to be unbelievable, to be very honest. And I think some of it comes from the home interest in growing tea. Some of this ghastly COVID-19 thing possibly has encouraged it, but I'm getting the impression from social media that people would love to grow a small, you know, a half acre of tea, or they'd like 200, 300 bushes, and they want to actually try making their own teas just to experiment and have fun with it. So there's that aspect. And I feel that is, I mean, you know, we also sell tea bushes through the Tea Gardens of Scotland website. So we'll get a good indicator there of where the interest is lying, but some of it is also that there's a better understanding now about loose leaf tea. And I think sadly, what's going on in Darjeeling, for example, you know, Nepal, they haven't had the opportunities to pluck this season because of the lockdown. And I think that will increase people's interest in homegrown. Now, obviously, growing tea in Scotland, as I've said earlier, is not easy and straightforward, but that still doesn't stop there being an interest in it. And we've got a feasibility study up on our website, on that Tea Gardens of Scotland website. And that, I think, gives people a reality check. But the groundswell of interest is definitely increasing. So I think it's got a really rosy future. And the very fact that, you know, the 9 of us back in 2016 came together as our Tea Gardens of Scotland group shows that there was a willingness there, thanks to Kinnettles Gold, though, which proved the concept. Because if we hadn't had PekoeTea in 2015 saying, yes, this is a lovely tea, I don't think we'd have got that group together. But, you know, we are now 9 women, all very excited about our tea project, and we've got our website, our marketing, and this, that, and the other, and we really believe we're going to produce fabulous teas. And I think that is part of the encouragement that everybody hopefully will get behind. And we know there are other people growing tea that are outside of our group that are growing lovely tea bushes at the moment, and will probably have their tea coming online as their bushes mature. So I think the interest is definitely building. There is a momentum there, which is exciting.